welcome to a World of Warship Blitz video, and today's video, if you can tell from the title, is Battleship Loadouts. So I often try and put the loadouts on the videos, but I know that I'm a bit slack and sometimes I don't quite get it right. So I'm doing a big set of videos. This is the third of them: destroyer loadouts, cruiser loadouts, and now battleship loadouts. So battleship loadouts pretty much follows some pretty standard themes, slightly more variation perhaps than the destroyer loadouts, a little less variation than perhaps you'd see with the cruiser loadouts. So here is a fairly good standard loadout that I use for a lot of battleships, especially tier 7 and below. Well, actually this is a tier 7 specialty loadout, it seems to be, because my Nagato has the same loadout. I have no idea why. So this loadout consists of a turret traverse, because that's probably the best you can put on a battleship at that tier. The deck protection modification becomes available at that tier. And I put steering modification in for dealing with torpedoes. So this is a response to getting burned down quite a lot. And yeah, okay, then I do fairly well in that sort of camo, with that sort of loadout. I think there's not many other ships that have that particular loadout. No, for some reason the Normandy has a rather special loadout where I've gone for torpedo protection. I have no idea why. It must be like my finger has slipped or something on the purchasing. A more modern loadout, so that was probably a loadout that I used fairly standardly maybe a few months back. More recently I have gone with turret traverse, acceleration and steering. So when we go and look at some of my more recent acquisitions, such as the Gascon and the Roma, well, Lilion is obviously using a bit of an older scheme there. We'll get to the German battleships because they're always a little bit different. And you can see with the Monarch and with the North Carolina, it's very much the same sort of loadout, acceleration and traverse, except that first slot is the dispersion. I always go for the dispersion improvement if I can get it, because with these sorts of ships, they're not brawling ships, right? So you basically want to tighten up those groupings and club things a little bit harder before they come in and attack you. So essentially the only difference between this and something like the I can't remember what it was, the Dunkirk, is that the Dunkirk has the traverse because it's not available at tier 8, whereas the tier 8 battleships have the dispersion, so that is available at tier 8. Right, let's go through a couple of other ones. I may have peeked at it just previously. This is an older scheme as well. In fact, this is probably my oldest schemer, and I'm not sure why the King George V has got it, and maybe it just needed that extra heft to get it into the turn. The Warspite and the Queen Elizabeth share this build, which is double traverse and turret acceleration. I have no idea why. What was driving my decision making at the time? My Amagi is one of my older battleships, and it has the dispersion but the double traverse as well. Now we get into some of the sort of weird and wacky ones, like the Fuso. The Fuso is like my New Mexico before I sold it, in that I got desperate about its speed and I put an acceleration propulsion mod into one of the slots. The traverse, obviously steering was something I like, and the turret traverse, and this thing has a lot of turrets to traverse. Another one that I'll talk about before I get on to the Germans, because the Germans are very special, is the Nelson. I call this my if it's not broken, don't fix it build. This has turret traverse because it's only tier 7. It has fire deck protection for fire reduction, and it has torpedo damage reduction as well. I have no idea. I chose it and it plays well, and I wonder if I could do better with some of that other stuff, but it plays well enough that I'm not really too keen to muck around with it. So I'm pretty comfortable because it performs everything I want it to perform, and I wouldn't want to take that stuff off it unless there was a good reason to. Right, the German battleships. The German battleships are characterized by secondary. So the Bayern, for example, has secondary range. So basically it's 10% dispersion improvement and 10% range. The Gneiser now is very similar, although it foregoes one of the turning for the deck protection, and these ships burn quite a lot. And I think that was probably the driving force behind that decision. The Bismarck. The Bismarck, interestingly enough, goes for main battery traverse and the dispersion in its first slot. It does go for deck protection because it burns frequently, and turning in the third slot. The reason that I've gone for dispersion is that the historical camo for this ship is a fairly standard battleship historical camo, plus 4% firing range, minus 4% battery main battery dispersion. So getting something to help the dispersion starts to overcome some of the severe limitations that the Bismarck has. The last ship we'll talk about is the Tirpitz, and the Tirpitz has a completely different build. It's got deck protection because it burns like anything. It has a secondary firing range. Now it has the secondary firing range along with, and we'll get to it in a second, the historical camo. In fact, we'll get to it now because I think you've seen steering before. So the historical camo for the Tirpitz is a bit different in that it provides plus 6% secondary battery firing range. So if you've got plus 6% there, plus 10% here, and wouldn't you believe it? Oh, yeah, okay. The Bismarck is the one that gets the improvement to secondaries, a bit of slightly faster reload. So the Bismarck secondaries fire a slightly shorter distance, but reload a bit quicker. But the secondary guns for the Tirpitz fire all the way out to essentially 8 kilometers, whereas for the Bismarck, the Bismarck fires out to 6.9 kilometers. Now, with the Tirpitz, the shells land at 8 kilometers don't have a lot of power left with them, but what it means is you've got destroyers starting to niggle at you. By the time they can effectively launch their torpedoes, or even ineffectively launch their torpedoes, you can pop them with secondary fire, which is a nice way to let them know that, you know, they're not welcome. So that is the battleships. I'll just dig down into some of the lower tiers. I can't remember what the Giulio Cesare has. It's got a fairly modern with acceleration traverse and turret traverse. Agincourt is also fairly modern, so it's, for me, it's a fairly recent build. The Dreadnought, Dreadnought's limited in what it can get because it doesn't have acceleration, so it has a traverse module, and I've gone for torpedo protection, although perhaps speed might have been the thing to go for. I still have the Congo. It's might only be my only Tech 5 ship. This is a very, 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 very ancient build for me, which is turret traverse and 2 times steering. As for the Mikasa, anything that makes it not quite so sucky is nice. I've gone for the main battery fires so infrequently and has such shocking dispersion that really you ride the ship on the secondaries. So if you're fighting against a Mikasa, fire HE at long range, and you know that's the best you can do. Don't close into range with the secondaries, because although they often shoot all sorts of different directions, they do hammer home. The other thing that I've got there is propulsion, because the Mikasa is just shockingly slow. Anyway, those are the loadouts for my battleships. I hope you found that educational. I hope that you found something useful in there. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time.